Hi everyone, it's Susan. I'm back here to talk about the Libra Solar Annular Eclipse. And it's a really interesting time that we're in. These eclipses are going to push a few things forward, as they always do. Eclipses are rather like a supercharged lunation, and we've just now had the lunar eclipse. I'm filming this, well, recording this on the 20th of September, so Friday afternoon, Brussels time. And the lunar eclipse was Tuesday night until Wednesday, 17th to 18th of September. So we're still in the eclipse cycle for the lunar eclipse. And these cycles are weeks before and weeks after each one of them. So I would have wanted to get this out to you last week, to be honest, but I just really needed a break. I just really needed a rest. And perhaps you're feeling that too. It's good every now and then, especially around the change of seasons, to pull back, depending on what your schedule allows. And when you pull back, it gives you an opportunity to reassess a lot of the things that you need to do. And it turns out a lot of the things that we think we need to do are not that important. That's the good news. So here we are now at the solar eclipse with the new moon in Libra. That's what makes a solar eclipse because that means that one of the nodes, either the north node or the south node, in this case, the south node, is with the new moon. That means that already the moon is not visible. The moon is not super happy when it's near one of the nodes because it's affected deeply by the nodal axis. This time, Ketu, the south node, is with the moon, it's draining, it's pulling that energy out. And the sun itself, is not particularly strong in Libra. It is considered to be in its fall because the sun is exalted in Aries. Because Aries is when the sun is strong, it's building its strength. It has that representational quality of the self. Aries is about the individual, the understanding of who am I, the self, which represents the sun as well. The sun is the consciousness of ourselves. And Libra, it's all about everybody else. It's all about us and we and them. And so the sun is a little bit miffed when it's in Libra. The moon does better. The moon is very happy to pay attention to everybody else's needs. But as I mentioned, the south node is very close, and therefore it's draining a little bit the quality of this moon. And then on top of that, you might see this little glyph here. That's Black Moon Lilith. And so we have the moon, the sun, and Black Moon Lilith all in the 10th degree, the early 10th degree in Libra. And Black Moon Lilith is also finding it difficult in Libra because there's a challenge around relationships. There's something that needs to be rectified. Things need to be talked about, and we need to sit down and have a chat when Black Moon Lilith is in Libra. There's something either unfair or something that requires a redo in relationships. Lilith is my short form for Lilith is that's where we're pissed off, and in terms of Libra. It might be around the dynamic in relationships. Now, I'm looking at this from a global perspective first and then from our individual chart. So that'll, of course, come across differently depending on where this is in your chart. We'll have a look at that sign by sign. But let's say in a general way, Libra represents relational things. So even including business contracts and the ways that we might relate to each other through human forms of relating, especially in terms of justice. So Libra represents, or even we could say Venus represents human justice, what is fair, what is right, what is in balance. And Jupiter would be more along the lines of divine justice, for example. So what's interesting here with all of this energy of pulling back and not entirely trusting, that's another Lilith in Libra thing. We've got a lot to talk about, and there's Mercury. Probably the happiest planet in this chart. Mercury's not entirely unhappy in air signs in general, loves to be in air signs, but also because that's all about chatting, communicating, socializing. Libra is very social. But Mercury in Libra is not quite sure, doesn't really know how to choose. It's a little bit difficult because it means that there's always a little bit of having to guess or second guess what the other person might want. So here again, we have an indication that things are not entirely certain Now, again, this might be more reflected in our global situation, in our global community, than it would be in our individual situation. That'll depend on your chart, or even just the house placement. So we'll again look at that later on. But it is worth mentioning that any kind of negotiations or anything that has to do with a jurisdiction or some kind of legal issue, relational issue, is not necessarily going to find its joy, because on top of all of what I've just indicated here, Venus, which rules this particular chart, the eclipse, as I forgot to mention, is the 2nd of October. So that's coming up next Wednesday, or in, sorry, 2 weeks, Wednesday. And in Greenwich Mean Time, or Universal Time, as it's known, it's 10 to 8 in the evening. And so you'll have to check your time. But that means that for the North and South Americans, it will be on the 2nd. And for some people, it will actually be on the 3rd. If you are in, let's say, Asia, or in the Pacific, in Australia, New Zealand, that will be on the 3rd of October. But it'll be overnight, so, or you're waking up to it if you're in Australia, New Zealand. So either way, just to say that this eclipse is not in a really easy dignity, with Venus, which is ruling this eclipse in the 6th house on this particular chart, just given the Greenwich Mean Time chart or the Universal Time chart. Venus also rules the ascendant. And we've got Uranus on the ascendant, so that suggests that there's something that needs to be changed right away in terms of how we deal with things. And especially as this is a Taurus ascendant, we're looking at Venus with the quality of how we relate to what we own, property, land, our stuff, the feeling of security, emotional security, financial security, the food that we eat, food security, these kinds of things. That's the Venusian quality of Taurus. And then, of course, the Venusian quality of the Libra, as I mentioned, is the relating part. But Venus, although she's in the 7th house here, is in a Mars-ruled sign. She's in Scorpio, ruled by Mars, which itself is not entirely happy. We'll get to that in a minute. And Mars ruled Venus is a wee bit jealous and can be even at times a bit vindictive or domineering. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case for every individual who has this, but it's the archetype of Venus in Scorpio. And when Venus is like this, with a chart that says things are going to be difficult, we got to sit down and talk about things, even though we feel a bit miffed about that. This is not going to be an easy journey. Venus is possessive in this energy. She's more concerned with whether I can trust or not. Can I trust these people? She's ruling the opposite sign, and so there we can see she's in her detriment. So when Venus rules Taurus, then she's in her detriment in Scorpio. When Venus rules Libra, she's in her detriment in Aries, and that's because she's ruled by Mars. And Venus is all about, like, let's hang out, let's be friendly, let's be nice to each other. And Mars is like, I want to talk about me, I want to talk about my needs, I want to do what I want to do. It's very impulsive and even divisive. So this is the nighttime quality of Mars in the Scorpio energy, and that means that Venus does things from the back. And the best case scenario we could find would be that there would be backroom deals going on, backroom negotiations, things happening in a way that is not super obvious to the world outside, but still chipping away at things that might be productive. And that we can see perhaps because of this water trine that's being formed here with Venus, Saturn, and Mars. Mars is, of course, ruling that Venus in Cancer, which is ruled by that moon that's, remember, not terribly happy. The moon itself being dragged down by that south node and being blocked out by that sun. So we're looking at this triad trying to cooperate with the, let's say, the least support in the circumstances. Now, Saturn doesn't have any particular dignity or lack of dignity in Pisces. It is broadly in square to Jupiter most of this year, the second half of 2024 and the first part of 2025, first half of 2025. It's moving out of that square now. It's 7 degrees away. Still, for me, worth looking at in terms of the energy. It's at least a sign-based square. And so that is one of the things that is part of this challenge around our times, not just this particular chart, but around our times. It's like this challenge of getting done what you really want to get done. And Saturn is going over old territory that we've already covered since April, maybe since late March already. Jupiter is entering new territory, but it's going very, very, very slowly because a few days after this eclipse, it's going to be retrograding pretty much at that degree, 21 and 20 minutes, I think, of Jupiter, of Gemini. So there's a lot of sluggishness here. There's a certain amount of resistance, but it might work really well in the sense that by resisting, by being a bit sluggish, we become more demanding. And there I come back to that Lilith. She's not happy with this situation. Things cannot go on like this. Things cannot be done like this. If you have this Venus and Lilith in your chart, you might find that you're constantly having to readjust in relationships and sort of, you almost maybe have to fight for your rights within relationship, fight to be acknowledged or fight to be treated fairly. So that's not such a bad thing. Mars in Cancer does describe an internalized anger or an anger that might be turned against one's people or one's way of, being raised or one's emotional nature. So there is that risk of, a kind of an explosive energy of frustration, of resentment that's simmering resentment, with Venus sort of planning her revenge, planning her way of getting her way from the back room. So there is a lot that can be done with this kind of chart, especially on a personal level, on an individual level. There's an enormous amount of willpower and potential in this chart, but it's born of frustration. It's born of something that feels a little bit edgy and frustrating, and not from joy, not from a place of ease. If you're feeling that, let it go, let it roll. There is, a time and a place for everything. It doesn't mean that you're not making progress in life. And especially if you're thinking in terms of your spiritual life, there are times when life becomes extremely difficult. And it's difficult to really tap into a feeling of ease and joy, especially when such challenging things are happening all around us. But it's not a failure, and it's not necessarily even a setback. It's part of the journey. And so this moment in time, this eclipse energy is showing us where we do need to recalibrate relationships. If I use the example of a marriage, there may have been a period of letting go, like Libra, moon in Libra can represent almost an indifference. It's an intellectual energy. It's an air sign. So it's kind of like, yeah, whatever, you do you. I'll be here. And then at a certain point, you're like, wait, what? Why am I doing this? And so there's a letting go of that. And there comes a point at which you really do need to contemplate what to choose, how to choose. Um, the other aspect of this is that it's with the energy in Libra, we can find ourselves over accommodating. This may not be your natural tendency, so this will not affect everybody. But if that is your natural tendency, and especially if this is happening in a relationship-oriented place, like your first or your seventh, or even the fourth, for example, the relationship kind of tensions can come up where you realize that you're always the one giving and you're not really receiving, or you're always the one compromising and the other one is always the one demanding what to compromise. So this is actually really constructive energy from that point of view. The paradox here is that we have a new moon on a south node. So usually the south node eclipses are where we're letting go. We're releasing something, moving on. And a new moon is something that we're starting, we're beginning. It's a cycle that's growing. And by the way, in terms of that growing cycle, it's best if you wait a wee bit around the second or third day after the eclipse, so meaning the 4th to the 5th of October, you start to see the moon appear in the sky. It's never really a good idea to implement something or jump into it on the day of an eclipse unless you have a specific task that's related to that energy of the eclipse, then it can work really well in your favor. Um, but otherwise, just hang back and let the energy move through you and through everyone else, and then see how you might want to start this new thing, because part of the starting something new is shedding. So it's a kind of a both and energy. Last week, or earlier this week, as I'm speaking to you, on the 17th, 18th of September, we had a north node full moon eclipse. And normally the full moon is the time for releasing or becoming aware of something, bringing something to your conscious awareness so that you can adjust or change that. Doesn't mean releasing in terms of never doing something again, but it's just recognizing what's working, what's not working, and then maybe deviating from that going forward. It's a time of declining energy as the moon starts to wane after the full moon phase, and the moon is waxing or growing in this new moon phase, but on the south node. So it's a paradoxical time. It's not an easy energy to manage collectively for sure, but you might be able to jump in and use that energy personally. Um, there is a square from Mars to all of this, just to add to the fun, and Mars is ruling the north node. So as we had Venus ruled by Mars, ruling the south node, ruling in this case the ascendant of this chart, we also have Mars ruling that north node. And that's a significant thing in and of itself, because it suggests that what we need to regulate here is this energy of Mars, which is frustrated, emotionally frustrated, maybe stewing in it a wee bit. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you haven't been able to express, or you've been absorbing too much, like I said, that can be that Libran tendency to kind of plod along and not really stand up for yourself, constantly sort of juggling everybody else's needs, acting as a mediator, acting as the peacekeeper, and you're kind of fed up with the role. So Mars is going to provoke some kind of inner frustration, and it can boil over in ways that are, coming out a little bit sideways or obliquely, in ways that are not entirely direct. Passive aggressive is another way of expressing this. And by the way, that's also a potential tendency for especially that Lilith in Libra, because she's frustrated and she may not be expressing herself terribly well. So we get a buildup of this energy, and we can really be frustrated by these days, by these times. And it's a really good way to, like a red flag, let's say, to recognize when things need to change from the inside out first, before you do your negotiating. Taking responsibility, that's the North Node in Aries. I take responsibility for my acts. I take responsibility for my journey, for doing the thing the way I need to do it. And that means letting go of this older tendency, that Libran tendency to be preoccupied with the needs of everybody but myself. Now, there are times when that works and it's necessary. And then if that becomes a life pattern, what can also happen is that it seems publicly acceptable, let's say socially acceptable. That's a very Libran keyword, socially acceptable, at least good on the surface. It seems to be good to be doing things like that, accommodating people, looking after everybody but yourself. But it's not in integrity. It's not in your integrity. It's not real. It's not honest. And this, I would say, is one of the things that we can really explore with this kind of energy. What is honest? What is real? Venus, when she's in a Mars-ruled sign, in Scorpio especially, she wants to be real. She wants to have the truth. She wants to know it all. Tell me the whole thing. She can get to that point where there's nothing that she's afraid of. And this is where we are with this energy. I'm not afraid. Venus is in this trine, that she's actually, it's fading away now, but Venus trining Mars in this role is very important, given the nodal axis that they both represent. And she's trining this Saturn. She's actually building there to a trine with Saturn. And Saturn itself is quite tightly trining Mars. So there can be this frustration and a pushing and a pulling, but it's with a long-term vision, recognizing we need to do this again, but differently. We need to change. Something has to give, something has to change. Now, where Saturn is at this point, retrograde, is roughly where it's going to be direct by Christmas time. And so it'll be an interesting thing to notice that some of these energies are going to come back and be regenerated, let's say, around this Saturnian quality of what is necessary in our society. This is an 11th house Saturn in Pisces, where we're trying to understand what do we believe, what is valid universally, what is appropriate, or what is the limit, let's say. What are the limits? And pushing the limits has definitely been a huge theme of these last months, and I would say the last year. And we're getting to the point where we're numb. We're numb to the atrocities, we're numb to the rudeness, we're numb to people misbehaving in high places, people who once upon a time were people we should be looking up to. We're numb to all of it. We're indifferent. And this is also part of this challenge of this Libran quality, which is, what are my values? What do I value any longer? Do I even know that? This could be a big question. So while Saturn is challenging us on what do I believe, what do I have faith in any longer, then what we try to learn from that Libran quality is, what are my values? What's important for me right now? This chart, this particular chart, would indicate that relational issues are part of our values, but they do require some kind of introspection. They require a deeper understanding. They require looking at the underbelly of what's going on. And that includes finances, and it includes the way that people deal with money and wealth and negotiations and contracts and all of these kinds of things. This sixth house eclipse is representing the challenges and the things, the obstacles that we have to overcome. All of this stuff is a collective duty that we have towards each other to work harder to overcome what is coming up, and not be let down, not be discouraged. And I'm just going to let the dog in. Sorry, she's just bothering me to come in. So hang on just a moment. Right. So there's a good manifestation of trying to, the dog getting her needs met, making noise, getting her needs met. And this is what we need to explore. What are my needs? What are my values? What is it I'm here to understand? How do I work in dynamics in relationship? And how do I manage my emotions as well? So actually, one of the advantages of a moon in Libra is that there aren't too many issues around emotions. It tends to be an ability to see both sides, or an ability to see all the different options available, and to want to have things to be fair. And so there's a lot of thinking about things. There's a lot of things that are considered from the place of what is appropriate. Again, that image thing is very strong with Libra. What is appropriate? What is fair? What is balanced? That's the Libra energy, especially for that moon. But it's challenged, remember, it's challenged. And then we get this gutsiness, this perhaps even inward percolation with Mars in Cancer that can turn us into, a kind of an unpredictable emotional ticking time bomb. And so we really want to start to understand ourselves from the inside out before sitting down, especially before confronting this Lilith here in Libra, and trying to understand, what are my needs? What am I dealing with myself? Taking that North Node responsibility. What am I taking responsibility for, that I realize I need to pony up and take responsibility for things that may not have gone right, that can be in terms of my relationships or in terms of my relation to what is going on around the world. So a very good time for introspection at a South Node new moon eclipse in Libra. Paradoxical times indeed. So this is the eclipse showing us that. At the eclipse, we also have our friend Pluto back in the last degree of Capricorn. This was the case also for the full moon Pisces eclipse that we just had. So these are the last eclipses that we're going to have with Pluto in Capricorn. This will never happen again. And Pluto is building, well, it's moving into a deeper sextile. It's a separating, trine with Uranus. It's separating at the moment. But as Pluto goes back into Aquarius on the 19th of November, it's going to start to build towards, in 2025, in July, a proper trine to Uranus. And so we're in this, again, sort of liminal space where things are not really lining up, things are not really, really clear. We also have the ongoing, never-ending Pluto sextile to Neptune, which is the sign of our times. Again, if you're not familiar with the way I think about these things, that for me represents this misrepresentation of power, abuse of power, things to do with manipulation of our thinking, manipulation of information, propaganda, by any other words, marketing, which is propaganda, manipulation, dishonesty, all of those things. These are the signs of our time since a century already. And that's been this basic movement of Pluto with Neptune. Now we've got a secondary sextile because Neptune is sextiling Uranus. So this adds another jolt of change in all of this. And it's in this quality of earth and water. So we've got an earth trine here with the Pluto and Uranus. And then we've got the sextiles between earth and water that are going to shift in 2025. We'll talk a lot about that because, of course, that's a big shift in terms of our collective identity, but also, of course, how we're going to be dealing with that through our natal charts as well as they're affected. So what else do you need to know about this? Let's think. Yeah, so we've got Chiron and Eris also in their little dance. So Chiron and Eris will be conjoining exactly in 2025, but they have been really, really close all through 2024. And Chiron is actually in orb of a square with Mars, and Mars is ruling that Chiron, so making it all the more important. Chiron squaring Mars is also another signal around how to manage anger, how to manage one's reaction to things, how to deal with things that may have been childhood wounding around self-expression or anger, action, taking action, making decisions. And that complicates the story as well. Chiron is retrograding back to where it has already been this year. We'll get back to 19 degrees and then it stations. So Chiron itself is questioning, going back over things that we've already looked at and exploring. Is this working? Is this good for us? That's in a very strong square to the midheaven and IC axis, if we look at the chart as it is. And also another indication that the direction that we're going is requiring some kind of healing. It's requiring some kind of contemplation around what it is that we're doing. And with Mars approaching the IC, in this case, within 4.5 degrees or so, 5.5 degrees, we have a big lot of questioning around the deeper needs for security, our needs for understanding ourselves psychologically, and in connection with who do I feel safe with, which is the Cancer frame of reference. You might call that family, that can be your people, that can be your nation. But it's also very much in terms of nurturance. So this becomes a challenge part of the time when we've got this kind of tension building around the other, how to take care of oneself when there's so much of our attention being called outwards towards others. It's a tough gig, but it's an important thing to do. We do need to take responsibility for how we contribute to everything that's going on around us in our little way, when we take care of ourselves, when we take care of our emotions, and we understand how we are in this dialogue with others or not, then we understand why the rest of the world is in the shape that it's in. So we have to keep reflecting, what can I change? How can I change that? How can I let go of behaviors that are either over accommodating and giving up power to other people, or they are passive aggressive and blaming other people. So we've seen that before, especially with the Pisces and Virgo axis that we were looking at last time, which talks a lot about that victim and so, that martyring kind of energy or this kind of self-sacrificial energy. It's not a good look, and it's not helpful to anybody. And by the way, that's where we're headed, of course, once we get this North Node shifting into Pisces and the South Node shifting into Virgo. We're going to have a year and a half or two, really, starting from September till the end of 2026. We're going to have a long period of time where we're going through these Pisces North Node eclipses and the Virgo South Node eclipses that will challenge us in terms of victim perpetrator energy. All right. Let's have a look at the sign by sign. Oh, and just a word of astrology lingo. An annular eclipse is not an annual eclipse. It's annular because it means that there's a ring of light around the moon. So as the moon comes between the Earth and the sun, it's eclipsing the sun. That's why we get the eclipse. That's what makes the sun unhappy. The moon is unhappy because it's on the south node on top of that. But on top of this, the moon doesn't even get to be like completely blocking out the sun because it's leaving the ring of fire around the edges. And so it's actually a very beautiful, very picturesque eclipse, as they all are, but this one especially so. So if you're one of those that likes to gaze or take photographs around the time of the eclipse, this would be a very photogenic one to take a photo of. I think that's it from what I wanted to say. I think there's not much more to add. We'll come back to these things again and again. Oh, sorry. One thing, yes, that I almost forgot is that Chiron is sextiling Jupiter. That's significant because we have this quality of, and again, all of these planets not in strong dignity, so that they're all kind of trying their best, but with difficult material to work with. Jupiter is ruled now by a Mercury that is kind of indecisive and trying to keep everybody friendly, and everybody's trying to get along. And it's ruled by a Venus that's not very trusting. She's a bit possessive and a little bit jealous and not really easy to manage. Not always what you get on the surface with Venus in Scorpio. And she herself is ruled by Mars that's super unhappy. And for all those reasons, the moon rather, that's ruling Mars is not terribly happy either, etc., etc. So there we got this Jupiter kind of itchy in Gemini, which is being sextiled by a Mars-ruled Chiron. And Jupiter Chiron sextile has a lot to do with understanding our beliefs, what we have faith in again, and is there something that we're not trusting again around our sense of self, around our sense of, in this case, community or exchanges with people, friendliness, that's the Jupiter Gemini. You could expand that to the economy or the sort of exchanges of all kinds, some commercial exchanges, for example, that are also challenged at this time. But really what we're looking at is the testing of faith in so many different ways. And that testing of faith comes through what we perceive other people to be doing around us. And so as a result, the best way forward here is to be truthful. Jupiter in the second house has strong values, strong on the principles of things. Jupiter in Gemini, not so much. So we really want to understand where the flexibility can be helpful, but the mitigating by kind of saying yes, but, or really not standing on principle is what's getting us into so much trouble these days as it is. A lot of what we are dealing with is an absolute lack of principle in the world around us, and the fact that there is hypocrisy in those principles is part of what has people up in arms and super frustrated in areas of justice, relationship, and relating. And that again comes back to that lovely little Lilith that's trying her best to get the best out of difficulty in relationships. So that Jupiter Chiron is a healing energy as well. Something that we need to explore for quite some time, because Jupiter will come back again to this placement in the spring. So I think that's not till April, but still, this is part of the longer arc of the Jupiter story as it's in Gemini. So there, I think I've said what I wanted to say about this annular eclipse, not annual eclipse. And I will do this sign by sign. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to do this one thing for Israel, simply because I want to show what I think might be coming up here. Now, if you're not into political or world astrology, you can skip this. You'll find the timestamps there somewhere below. And thanks to those who do add them, even when they're already there, much appreciated. And especially when I ask you to add them because I haven't had time to put them in, even more appreciated. I really do appreciate you all for helping everybody else in the comments. So let's have a look at Israel. We're going to put Israel in the middle, and the solar eclipse, the annular solar eclipse in Libra around the outside. So this puts that in the first house. Now, in a nation's chart, the first house is how the nation is perceived. That's how the nation senses itself and how it engages in the rest of the world. There's Neptune in the first house. Now, again, in a mundane reading, we always have to lean towards the most negative interpretation. When we have an individual reading, there's a lot more that we can see a person evolving in different ways towards something that is an improvement. In the mundane chart, that's not entirely true. So if you have some of these features in your chart, this is not necessarily your case, although notice that these will be also tendencies. So this particular eclipse is happening exactly on the Neptune in the first house, which is not great. Anyway, having Neptune in the first house can lead to a lot of self-pity. It can lead to a lot of a feeling of not being able to manifest oneself or having a frustration around how one manifests. If we look that Neptune is up above the ascendant, so if we took this from a quadrant style chart, that would be a 12th house Neptune, which connects very strongly to ancestors, which we know that for sure the Israeli project definitely does. And it's also in a trine to Mercury, which is in Gemini in the 9th house, very strong Mercury, quite idealistic. Mercury trining a retrograde Neptune can, however, be not terribly clear, not entirely sure of its communications, and even potentially not honest with communications. And that's one of the things that does show up in the tendency of this chart. We have with this particular transit, with the eclipse, an extra sort of emphasis on that, where we have all of this energy on the Neptune, and again in the trine to that Mercury, and then we also have Venus on the South Node. So there's a lot of issues here which are not clear. Venus is not in strong dignity in the second house of values, money, worthiness, the issues of the nation's wealth and property and so on are called into consideration now because of the Venus in the second house on the South Node, and this signifies loss. We have a Mars that's not in strong dignity, even if it's in the 10th house. It's a strong Mars, but not in good dignity, so it's not doing, let's say, the best that it should be doing. It shouldn't be, it's not engaging in a way that is straightforward, let's say, with Cancer. And then we've got Pluto in the 4th house, suggesting that there's been a lot of change around property and land and so on. Pluto being, again, about power and how to use that power. Pluto is in an inconjunct with Mars at this time. It has been for over a year, the better part of 18 months. In fact, that Pluto has been inconjunct Mars, which has been a part of the tension that's going on here. Not helpful, not easy at all. And then Pluto was exactly conjoining the IC over the last, let's say, 2.5 years as well. It's still within an orb, but it's moving out of that orb quite soon. Yeah, the Pluto is still in an orb of a trine to the Sun, and the Sun itself has been impacted really strongly by Uranus this year. It was the 20, 21 degrees and 50 minutes of Taurus, where we had Jupiter conjoining Uranus. So that was strongly in conjunction with the sun. But we have Chiron right across the alley in the natal chart. So there's this big change, a big impetus for change. It's an eighth house energy, so it's not entirely clear. Again, we see things are not entirely um, out in the open. Things are not easy or not as they appear when, especially when the sun is in the eighth house. The United States has that as well. There are a couple of other countries that have sun in the eighth house. It's not necessarily an easy thing to manage in terms of the leadership, in terms of who the leaders are. So there's lack of clarity, a lack of perhaps honesty potentially as well. So we have a Venus in the 10th house in Cancer. She's ruled by the moon in Leo, which is in turn ruled by that eighth house sun, which is in turn ruled by that Venus. And so there's a whole big connection here between the eighth house, 10th house, and 11th house that pulls in these ideas of what is shared, what should be shared, on what basis should it be shared. And Uranus has been changing that notion for quite some time. And we're going to see Mars stationing on that moon for essentially most of November. I mean, in terms of the slowness of Mars, most of November, December, and the first week of, well, let's say it'll be done, let's say by the new year. Mars will be really honing in on that moon in Leo in the Israeli chart. So I think that what we're seeing now is a loss based on something that was either a misconception of who they are or a misidentification with a goal or an ideal, as we see that Mercury in a trine. Something is being shed, something is being lost. I remember last year when the Hamas attacks happened on the 7th of October, and somebody in the comments, I did a video that day because it's life-changing. That was 1 week from the eclipse then. That was I think it was on the ascendant 22 or 23 degrees, then 24 degrees. I can't remember the exact degrees. Hugely impactful. And now we're seeing the connection to that a year ago. Somebody asked me, what was Israel going to become? Was something going to happen to Israel? For sure, there's no way around that. But what Israel do you want to keep is the question. Again, we have to come back to this question of values. And so this is a difficult charge for that country. Chiron is going back and forth over the descendant, which does also manifest as something along the lines of having difficulties and learning through painful relationships, who's on your side and who's not. I mean, it's already a challenging chart because the nodal axis is squared by a Pluto and Saturn conjunction, so it's not an easy chart. This is for so many reasons not an easy chart, and ideologically strong, but maybe not so much in terms of the relational quality, how they relate to others, and what is fair, what is just. So I don't think this is a good for this season. This particular moment in time is good for Israel. You don't even need to be an astrologer to see that. They have lost an enormous amount of support internationally, and it's becoming untenable. And I think this is where the conjunction with Neptune, it either allows them to see that and changes something, or it just pushes them further into that delusion of who we are and how we relate to our suffering, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to relationships. Neptune in Libra is not it's not so easy. It's not, the relationships are not that clear. The nodal axis is building up to an exact square with Venus. That's very soon after the eclipse, so that'll happen exactly in November, I think. But it's really already very, very much squaring Venus, which is ruling the south node from the 10th. And so we see that Venus has also a role here to play in terms of the 10th house of the leadership, which I also think is going to be sacrificed. The rulers, the leaders can be seen through that 10th house, or the government can be seen there through that 10th house. And the actual leader is the sun, which is definitely being transformed this year as Uranus comes back to 23 degrees. It cleared it already this year in May, June, and it will come back to that 23rd degree and linger there. And that will be when the leadership transforms. And so there we're looking at, let me just find this. If we go forward, I'll see when that's going to happen. So that I suspect is going to be very evident by December. As Uranus stations and turns around through December and January, that will be when the leadership is going to change. Yeah, Mars is going through the 10th house, so that is also how the nation is wielding itself, wielding its power, wielding its values. As we see, it rules the second house, rules the house of relations with others. It's a tense passage for Mars up in the 10th house there. Strong Mars, but not in good dignity, acting from this place of self-awareness that is not necessarily inclusive of others. That Pluto all through 2025 will be in, and 2026 will be opposing that moon, which represents the people as well. Not a good time for Israel at all. Yeah, we also have, just to push this back a wee bit again, we have Jupiter stationing on the Mercury within a degree of the Mercury, and again trining that Neptune. So there might be some clarification or some awareness around what all of this means for Israel from their own perspective in terms of what they find important legally, or how that might be dealt with legally. Jupiter is happy in the 9th house, but it's in Gemini, and again, from the legal standpoint, it's a little bit wobbly. Jupiter will be sextiling Pluto, then Saturn, and then later in the spring, Mars. So that for the 3rd time, it will have been in this sextile with Pluto and Saturn. And that explains some of those legal issues that have come up, as well as the Saturn going through the 6th house since March 2023 rather. I guess that kind of corresponds, not really, but it's certainly contributing, let's say, to the challenges that Israel would have had, which actually would more be like the Saturn squaring Mercury in the 9th, which would have happened in January, February, December, January, February, March Saturn rather was building, pushing into that square, which perfected in February, squaring that Mercury. So that's when the International Court of Justice decided that there's a good reason to believe there's a genocide going on, as if we didn't need to trust our own eyes. So let's now have a look sign by sign. We'll take this down and go back now to the eclipse chart and have a look at this event from each sign's point of view. All right, so we'll start with Aries. We're just going to back that up a wee bit so that we've got Aries on the ascendant. Now, Aries, you've already been dealing with the North Node in your 1st house. Now, this is for Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, rising sign. If it's your Sun, this has a lot to do with you as an individual, your work, your sense of purpose, your vision for your life. If it's your Ascendant, it has to do with all different dynamics in your life and how you engage in your life. but it really does affect you deeply because it's really about changing your whole approach to life in so many ways. If it's the moon, it can just show up as something that is more internal, more psychological, perhaps connected to your way of perceiving your life or how you manage yourself emotionally, how you connect with people. That can connect you to your home as well. The moon is about the home. It can be around how you connect to your mother as well, or older females. So, yeah, and if you do have, Aries is known for its impulsive behavior and for its let's go kind of attitude, which is not so much the case with Libra. It depends on the quality of Libra in the natal chart, but you might find that, especially if it's your moon, that you have this kind of shoot first, ask questions later attitude. And this could be one of the things that you're realizing as is something is going on in the relational area of life where perhaps somebody has had enough of that, or you have yourself have been out of balance in a relationship for one reason or another. Um, that relationship is going to need some kind of change. There would be a need for you to change the way that you show up in relationships. It might be that you're actually unusual for an Aries rising. If that's the case, maybe over accommodating. That again depends on your chart. Aries tends to not think so much about other people, but rather think more in terms of themselves and how what they desire, what they want. Again, it depends on your chart. I'm only speaking to the archetype, but this could be an opportunity to realize there's something that needs to be explored on somebody else's behalf. Whatever this is about, it's definitely hugely important because it's going to affect all kinds of relationships. Now, if you're in business for yourself, you might decide that business partners or clients are no longer really a good fit, or that you may have been overindulging in terms of conditions around clientele or business relationships. So that can also be part of that story. Venus is in the eighth house, so that's showing that there's some kind of benefit, some kind of gain that comes from those relationships, whether it be marriage or important business partners, for example. That's the second house from the seventh house, so of relationship. So it's what you gain from relationship. It's the benefits, let's say. This can also show up as something to do with an intimate question, intimacy within relationship. So if that is the situation that you're in, this is a good time to try and deepen that intimacy, really work towards that. Saturn is in the 12th house, so there can be some aspects of life that you're recognizing you need to deal with. You've had Neptune there for a long time. That can be a very spiritualizing impact. It can be something that brings you to a deep awareness of your spiritual nature, your unconscious mind, and also potentially ancestors and your connection to them. Um, but the Neptune in the 12th can also be confounding. It can be difficult to grapple with things. And with Saturn there, this can be something that has helped you with that, where you recognize what needs to change based on your goals. Saturn rules your 10th house of your ambition, your drive, based on what you see for yourself going forward. If you have any issues around addictions, for example, or any issues around things that need to be um, just sorted out, better boundaries, issues around loss. Saturn is helpful in that sense when it's in the 12th house. Saturn actually does very well in the 12th house. Um, it's also in a trine to Mars in your fourth. So whatever's going on relationally can involve your home life, and how that might be going for you. It could be that there's a lot of busyness around the home, or there's a need to adapt something around home. There may be a need to adjust, whether it be the physical home, like a household project of some kind of renovation or fixing things up, or it could be to do with property. Land is the fourth house as well, ownership of immovable property. So second house is stuff that you can move around, your valuables that you can move around, and the fourth house is the immovable stuff. And so your home and your land and so on. I guess I don't know if you have a mobile home, whether that's second or fourth. Not really sure. Maybe the third house for your vehicle. It kind of fits all those ticks all those boxes. So anyway, I'm just thinking out loud. So that Mars in the fourth can also connect you to some frustration or struggle around family, around your lineage, around your household situation that might need dealing with. Now, Mars is ruling your eighth house of family secrets and things that are challenging, things that can come through a memory or an awareness of things that was not so easy. So there may be something that needs expressing. Mars is ruling you in the first house, especially if it's your ascendant. It still rules your sun and it rules your moon. So by derived houses, this also applies. And Mars, of course, has ruled that North Node since July 2023. And it continues to do so all the way through till early January. I think it's the 11th or 12th of January of 2025. By that time, Mars will be in your fifth house. So whatever's going on in the fourth can be very clarifying to help you push forward with your projects in the fifth house. So think about this in terms of clearing out what is going to be potentially an obstacle to you doing the thing that you'd really like to do, how you want to show up as you go forward through November and December, and then again from April through June. So this is good all around, very good housekeeping. In general, it's your ruler, Mars, that represents you. It's like you're on a mission here in the fourth house with your ruler, which is kind of like clearing out the dross, let's say, clarifying, you could say. If there are issues around anger, frustration, resentment, this kind of thing, it would be a really good time to sort that out as well. It can lead to digestive issues, problems with your assimilation. Now that can be a kind of a quality of Saturn in the 12th as well. Assimilation might be an issue. That can be assimilation within the bilateral relationship or in general with the family or in relationship. I'd have to see your natal chart. But when we talk about relational assimilation or societal assimilation, there can also be this question of, am I assimilating what I'm eating? And often that goes hand in hand, an interesting thing to explore psychologically. So I think this is going to be a pivotal eclipse for you. For the very, very last time, you have Pluto in the 10th house, so you've understood your mission. You've got a lot of clarity around what it is that you want to achieve, how those drives and ambitions may have affected you in relationships, because Pluto in the 10th it can be hard to manage. It's challenging, especially Capricorn, Saturn ruled Capricorn, where ambition can be so driven that you're actually willing to sacrifice relationships, or you're willing to sacrifice some aspect of the quality of how you show up in order to achieve your goals. If that's been the case, this would be the opportunity to repair any damage with that. That would be going back over the last 16 years, kind of. So a great opportunity for you to reassess, let's say, what's coming up here in not just on the 2nd of October, but in the months ahead, because it will extend. This is a theme that carries on, and it will extend quite far into the next year. All right, so we'll leave it at that. Yeah, you'll see a lot of results coming from this with the Libra full moon when the sun is in your sign. So from late March through the first 3 weeks of April, you'll see the results of what's coming up here, if not before. Alrighty, so good luck with that then, Aries, and I'll see you in the next video. So Taurus, you saw at the beginning, I hope, that this is very much your ascendant or your quality that's designating this chart, or design, let's say, laying out the flavor of this chart. So if you are the sun or the ascendant or the moon in Taurus, this will affect you through the 6th house. Now that implies something to do with work and how you show up in your everyday life. Now, if this is your ascendant, that will be very evident to you, potentially through issues around health and or the way that you show up perhaps too much for other people. that can be self-deprecating or not taking into consideration your own needs, that can affect your health, that can affect your quality of life. If it's your sun, then this has to do with work, perhaps a desire or an ambition that you need to work harder for, or that you need to let go of with the South Node, new moon, new moon in the sixth house. Something there that you're recognizing is just got to change. Pluto will be moving into your 10th house in November. You've already had it there, but when Pluto moves into your 10th, it's going to be that big change in terms of how do I show up out in the world. And so this can be an opportunity for you to recognize this can't go on any longer. You have Venus helpfully in the 7th house. She is, however, in her detriment in Scorpio. And so she's ruled by a particularly pesky Mars, who's very ambitious and driven, but can be adding to a certain amount of cattiness or gossipiness or frustration or edgy way of connecting with people. So be careful in that sense of how you take responsibility. That will be the way to resolve this. So beware of any sarcasm or any kind of tendency to point the fingers of blame without taking responsibility, because for a Cancer Mars, moon-ruled Mars in the 3rd house, that can lead to bitchiness. So be careful about that. Sarcasm and unfriendliness. There can be struggles or difficulties with siblings or cousins or neighbors, potentially around this. I'd have to see your chart to see if that's your case. Saturn is in the 11th house, so it's actually having you think a lot about the quality of your relationships in general, like kind of out there, more acquaintance style relationships, or the groups and people that you spend time with. Saturn in the 11th also can have you uncertain in terms of what your vision is for your future. Pluto has been working hard on that for 16 years in terms of what you feel your purpose has been, or what you have faith in terms of what life is all about for you. And Saturn is more, what are the practical implications of this vision that I have? Saturn may be putting maybe a bit of a damp squid in terms of that vision, especially since Neptune will have been creating all kinds of visions and illusions potentially around friendships and dreams for the future. And Saturn is coming along and going, now, come on, that's not really going to happen, is it? And so when Saturn now is retrograding in a trine to Mars, trining Venus, this is a great opportunity to really see clearly am I in the right relationships? Are these the right people for me? Are they supportive? Is this the right way to work that? You will have an opportunity with Venus in the 7th, because she is nonetheless your ruler. Venus in the 7th will give you an opportunity to be exploring this question with somebody else, and so that you don't necessarily have to figure this all out yourself. But don't forget also that often what can happen is that you stay too long with things that are not functioning very well, Taurus. You can be a wee bit stubborn and perhaps stick with things partly due to fear, a lack of security, a fear of lacking in connection or intimacy or emotional or psychological or financial security. And that can have you clinging on. So really use this opportunity to look clearly at what's going on in your life, is how it's affecting your everyday health and well-being and your schedule and how you work, how much you offer to other people, how much you give, and realize that maybe the time has come to modify some of those things. Right. I think if you listen again to the introduction, you'll also get a good flavor of what this represents, because it's very much speaking to the same energy, Taurus. So I wish you well, and I will see you in the next video. Gemini, this eclipse is happening in your 5th house. That can represent something to do with your children, some change around children. Do I, don't I want children? The South Node is there, so it might also be that there's some kind of a sense of letting go of either the responsibility around children or the actions required to maintain children, or not. And if this has not got to do with children, then it can also have something to do with your creative enterprises, things that you might like to do that are based on hobbies or things you love to create, that it's not really doing anything for you anymore. It doesn't feel right any longer, and it doesn't really correspond to this North Node energy, which is taking you in a new direction, new sense of what you want out of life. Jupiter is in your first house. That can make you at times um, want to expand your vision for yourself, take on a lot of different things, take on a lot of activities, take on a lot of responsibilities, new things that you want to envisage for your future, especially because the North Node is there in the 11th house. But then it's got this hard stop every now and then with Saturn that is asking the important questions. Is this going to be, does this have legs? Is this real? And part of this phase of questioning that is 2024 and 25 is also this energy of the solar eclipse, which is saying, okay, look, there's something here in the context of the way that you're showing up in these fifth house areas, which is about how you have fun, how you enjoy your life, how you create through yourself. Can you show up and be yourself through those creative activities? How you connect with your children? What of that needs to change? What of that is ready to go? Pluto is back in your eighth house. Very briefly, it's the last time you're going to have Pluto in your eighth house, and this will be a kind of a little bit of a glimpse at what has been wrapping up for you this year and last year of 16 years of Pluto going through cleaning out unconscious processes, fears, things that have to do with family secrets, things that have to do with what you have not been able to process or understand. And this might also just give you that last nudge to understand something enough that you can take the action required here with that new moon in Libra, because Venus is asking for action. She's ready to do the dirty work. She's got her dish gloves on in the sixth house, ruled by Mars in the second house, that says, I know what I want because I understand my values. Perhaps this is about money, something to do with income or money that you need to manage for yourself. Pluto is also in a trine to Uranus in the 12th. So that also pulls in the ancestors. It pulls in energy of what's behind the eyes, the things we don't really see, the things that have been changing that you may not even be super aware of, although it's been very prominently in your unconscious, maybe even as a sense of frustration or irritation, that is a sense of not being at peace or not finding what you want. Now, this can again help you in terms of understanding what to deal with, how to reboot your fifth house. Fifth house is great, by the way, as it's a place where you can work in entrepreneurial enterprises. Now, that depends on the rest of your natal chart, but just in general, fifth house is entrepreneurship. It's how you might work in a business setting and create a project that leads to something that you're doing every day. This is especially what is signified by the Venus in the sixth ruling the fifth. It can also suggest that there's issues around children, or that the children require some kind of new approach, because whatever it is, it's involving quite a lot of work and input in the everyday. Not entirely, there's a wee bit of a begrudging attitude with the Venus in Scorpio in the sixth. Venus in the sixth, it's like, yes, honey, of course I'll do that, but it's like not really. And that's combined with the trine to Mars in the second, and then the Saturn in the 10th. So these, let's say, these challenges, aside from the Venus, which is not in good dignity, she's quite helpful, but otherwise challenging energies of Mars and Saturn. These are the money houses, or the houses, let's say, not so much of money, but your work houses. They connect you to income and your day-to-day work and how you take responsibility for things. So you're being asked to take a lot of responsibility, and you may need to question at this time, is it really up to me? Is this really what I want? Fifth house is where we want to find what makes us happy. It's actually more like the fourth house is where we find that, where we figure it out. And the fifth house is how we express that. So that's part of this dynamic. And your ruler, Mercury, Mercury rules, whether it be your ascendant, sun, or moon in Gemini. Mercury is the ruler, and it is very tightly implicated with this eclipse. So you are very implicated with this fifth house energy. So trying to understand that, how can I express my creativity? How can I engage myself in a way that allows me to break free from unconscious limitations or historical family limitations or financial limitations? Because we've got that Mars in the second, which looks like there's a bit of a struggle around money that may also be when Pluto comes back and then leaves finally your eighth house. You may actually get some kind of so-called reward in the form of a payback or money that you might receive through an inheritance or something like that. Or at the very least, a deeper understanding of yourself coming through that eighth house, 12th house trine with Uranus. Right. So that's it, Gemini. I'd have to see your own chart to see how this all would play out, but it definitely looks like something in the context of relationship needs to be cleared up, needs to be clarified so that you can get to that place of loving it. This is fifth house is romance as well, so it could be that there is either a romance on the way out because you're realizing something's not working, or it's on the way in and you're realizing I'm going to do this differently now. Again, I'd have to see your natal chart to know which way the door is swinging. All right, good luck anyway, Gemini, and I'll see you in the next video. So Cancer, this is happening in your house of home and property, where you live, your lineage, what's coming through, family stuff, family of origin especially, but even the family that you create. It's a psychological house as well. The fourth house is where you understand your deeper motivations, your inner psychology, your emotional nature. Cancer is the moon is ruling that fourth house in the natural zodiac. Cancer is the fourth house, so it's a familiar place for you. But you also have Mars in your first house, which suggests that something is more important somehow brewing in your mind or in your attitude that has to do with how you show up in the world. Mars is ruling your 10th, where the North Node is pulling a lot of your attention. You're done with something in the area of home where you live or what structures you rely on, and you're moving towards something based on what you're doing, based on what you want, that is taking you out into the world. And that Mars is in a trine to Venus, which is in your fifth house. So this can involve a love relationship, or it can involve, again, a project of passion project, your children, connecting with your children in some way. That is connecting to the Saturn in the ninth house. So again, it pulls in this trine. It's a water trine between the Mars, Venus, and Saturn that is connecting the first, fifth, and ninth houses. Those are what are called the dharma houses. Those are the houses of why am I here? How do I engage with life? What's my purpose? And that quality is very much uppermost in your mind these days, but particularly at the moment with this eclipse, because the ruler of this eclipse is in the fifth house, where you're letting go of something that is maybe what you feel is done. It's reached the end of the line in terms of a structure or a way of basing your life on something. That can be material in terms of where you live, and it can be more of a metaphorical or metaphysical thing in terms of what you build your life upon in terms of your, let's say, inner foundation, psychological and emotional foundation. So it's definitely a big moment in time for releasing what is not a healthy way of, or let's say, not a helpful foundation for life. In order to get you to that 10th house of accomplishment and what you feel your social status is, how you show up in the world, here's the challenge is that you need to find the courage to let go of the thing that may have felt comfortable but you may have compromised a lot of yourself to get there. Remember, the moon is your ruler. We're talking about the moon here, not in a happy chappy kind of area. Um, because of that south node and because it's an eclipse. So there's a part of you that is recognizing that there has been a lot of sacrifice around whatever it has been up until this moment serving you to feel supported, but it may not have been entirely to your benefit. Now you can deal with that, let it go, take that out into something that is more proactive around how you vision, how you want to go forward in the area of work, especially, or social engagement in terms of how people see you. Also, that's the house of your social status, meaning am I married? Am I a mother? Am I a father? Am I divorced? Am I single? All of those different questions come up there. And so with Mars in the first, that's part of what that Mars in the first is always going to be reflecting back until April of next year, with the exception of November, December, and the first week of January. Basically, between now and April, Mars is pushing a lot of your attention out into the 10th house of accomplishment. Venus at the moment is ruled by that Mars in the 5th house of what brings me pleasure, how can I create, how can I express this in a way that is bringing me happiness? Because whatever this was that Venus is ruling, remember, whatever this thing was in terms of what made you feel settled, or how you connected to family, that's no longer functional. It's not applicable anymore. It might help you to go back to uh, the beginning of 2006. That would have been the last time the nodes were here. That's a big shift. The first couple of months of 2006. So, or let's say maybe the first 3 months. So that's maybe one way of looking at that. And then, of course, we've got this Uranus that's moving into your 12th house, currently forming a trine with Pluto that's just moved back into your house of relationship. That might be part of this story where you're realizing there's all these, both in terms of Uranus, these dreams and visions that I had for my future, how I saw myself, how I saw groups and friends. All of that seems to be really coming to a close, with Pluto at the same time recognizing this is what I need in relationships. This is the dynamic I've learned about in relationships, and it needs to come to a close. But these are trines that are supportive. It's helpful energy. You get it, and you're ready for the change. Neptune is also in that configuration, but Neptune has been in this area of changing your relationship to what you believe. And next year, when we look at the eclipses, but already really from the end of January, beginning of February, and throughout March, Neptune plays an incredibly important role in your personal transformation, especially how other people perceive you and how you perceive your role and your purpose in life. Both Saturn and Neptune do. Jupiter is in your 12th house. So that's emphasizing this quality of perhaps faraway places, foreign lands, or again, the quality of what do I believe? How do I engage in my spiritual life? How do I connect with people who have passed, or ancestors, that whether they're DNA or spiritual ancestors? It's in a challenging aspect to that Saturn at the time of this eclipse, but it's an ongoing thing. And that is something that has a kind of a stop-start quality in terms of your belief. There may be periods of doubt, great doubt around your faith, or doubt around your way of expressing your faith, or how do I really trust that I believe this, or believe in whomever? Uh, uh, like the Arabs say, you should trust in God and tie up your camel. Don't put your trust in people. And Pluto in the 8th will show you why when that transforms back in November. But that challenging aspect from Saturn is clarifying, and this can also have something to do with foreign lands and traveling abroad and going away with a vision, going away with a purpose. So a very interesting timing for you whenever the eclipses are on the angles like they are for you, Cancer. Again, for sun, moon, and rising. So it applies by derived houses for the sun and moon, but it really is felt very powerfully for the ascendant sign. There is big housekeeping going on here in that fourth house because it's affecting you by square. It's opposing the 10th house and it's squaring the relational house. So you will notice this eclipse, dear Cancer, as all of the cardinal signs will. So good luck, and I'll see you in the next video. Leo, this is happening in your third house. The third house is all about willpower. It's about what we enjoy doing, what we find motivating. It's our get up and go. It's the local space, our neighbors, our cousins, extended family, how we communicate things, especially with an air sign on the third house. And especially now that with Mercury there as well, there would be probably quite a lot to say. It would be something where you're understanding issues around your vision for what has gone and where you want to go towards, because that third house, ninth house axis also represents sort of what is real or what is local, what is tangible, based in opposition to what I vision, what I hope for in my future with that ninth house quality. The expansionist quality of that ninth house where you're going, you might realize that there's certain aspects of your third house, local space, local environment, communication or exchanges of all kinds, things around siblings that requires you letting go and starting afresh in order to get to that sense of what is my purpose, to, let's say, to override or overcome any obstacles to you showing up in this way that you're hoping to show up. The sun, of course, is your ruler for Leo, and it's not in an easy place for the sun. The sun is a bit it doesn't engage super well in terms of its own needs. So there can be this wishy-washiness. There can be maybe an over compromising or an over intellectualizing of things that can be frustrating. Um, so there may be a need for some more clarity. Mars in the 12th can bring its own share of trouble in the sense that Mars in the 12th can have you lashing out or dealing with things in a way that is not even clear to you, where it's not necessarily obvious why you're feeling certain emotions or why things are coming through you in that way. Mars rules your fourth house of your unconscious or your, let's say, psychological foundation, rules your ninth house of your vision for the future and your connection to spirit or God, your father as well, teachers and so on. And it's in a trine to Venus, which is ruling the eclipse. So something's going on at home or in your foundational experience, in your inner experience. It could very much be that, because we've also got Saturn in the eighth. You're definitely feeling a bit isolated with this Saturn in the eighth house. That's part of the challenge of Saturn in the eighth as it's transiting there. You might feel like you've really been thrown back on your own resources, that you have to deal with things a lot on your own, that you're putting in maybe more than you think you're receiving. And that could be one of the things that needs to change around the time of this eclipse, where you get that quality of, I'm done, we're moving on into something else now with this third house eclipse, letting go. It's a challenge with the south node in the third house and the north node in the ninth house. It's a challenge to let go of material comforts. The third house is a kama house. So kama means pleasure. And sometimes there's such an attachment to pleasure. Kama is the third, seventh, and 11th houses. And so there can be such an attachment to pleasure that it's difficult to let go. So you really have to question, you really have to look deeply at what it is that needs to change here, because it could be an obstacle to moving forward. Now, if it's something to do with communication, you have something written or you want to express it or you want to publish something, say something, produce something in some way, it's a good time for that. Not only is the North Node in your ninth house, which represents publishing, teaching, and all of those kinds of things, but also you've got Jupiter in the 11th, where you expand into something visionary, or that there can be this role of great support that comes through other people or people well placed to help you in seeing your dreams realized. And Saturn in the eighth house is ruled by that Jupiter. And Saturn in the eighth can also be extremely helpful when you're looking deeply into something. Now, that's another thing that the Mars in the 12th can be very helpful with. Researching, investigating, learning behind the scenes, trying to grapple with things that are not necessarily evident. And that Saturn can bring out quite a lot of determination and working towards knowledge, working towards something of either occult knowledge or mystical knowledge, perhaps even psychological, something related perhaps even to health, because we've still got that Pluto just until the 19th of November in your sixth house. That has to do with your everyday work and health, and it's trining the the Uranus in your 10th house, which is about how you're showing up in a different way. So I'd have to see your natal chart to see how this would all pan out for you individually, but I think these are things that you can really reflect on. To what extent I need to question my attachment to pleasure or my attachment to an individual, which may not be really constructive for me. Right. I'm going to leave it at that, Leo. Good luck with everything, and I see you in the next video. Virgo, this is happening in your second house of money and finances and your wealth, movable property, the stuff you get to wear and move around. And something here also is changing, perhaps in relation to your feelings around those things. What is important to you may be shifting. Your sense of your values may be shifting. There may be something to do with family. The second house is also family. It's everything that supports you. So that can also play a role here. So there's a letting go here and a reconnection to something that seems to be a better fit for you. Your ruler Mercury is very strongly involved in this eclipse. So you're questioning or you're realizing how things need to shift to fit better for you. Venus is in the third house, so it's a strong time for communication and connection, and maybe even exchanges of some kind in terms of commercial exchanges. So this could also be a good time for working towards a business or working towards some kind of investment, depending on your chart, because not everybody has a good chart for investing or money or taking risks. You've got Saturn ruling your fifth house, so it's generally speaking, Virgos are a little bit risk averse, but you never know. Pluto is back in that fifth house, so this can also be about some new relationship to relationship in the romantic sense. That's love and romance, something changing there for you. Well, the second house of values and how you connect to your finances and so on might be playing a role here as well. It's trining Uranus at the end of your ninth house, which is about your vision for why you're here, or what you believe in, what you have faith in, and that Uranus is ruled by Venus in the third. So there's something very practical, sort of pragmatic that you're understanding about this changing vision. Neptune is at the end of your seventh. So again, if this is a relational thing, you still need to beware that Neptune in the seventh can have you overgiving in relationships, maybe taking on things that other people should be dealing with, whether it be people who are not really able to live their own life fully, or they are, you know the thing because you're a Virgo and you pick up all these strays and these people who need help and need your guidance, but just be careful to recognize what is necessary and what is simply over reliance on you. And this is, I think, where this eclipse can really help you. So Jupiter is in the 10th house, a very strong time for you. And Jupiter is ruling that seventh house of relationships and also rules your home. And so it looks like there's something here that's bringing you quite a lot of benefit through uh, through this relationship energy. So the more that you clarify, the more that you get clear about that, the more that you be, aware of what you need, because the North Node also is in the eighth house of intimacy, shared resources, and so on. Being aware of what you need, the better this Jupiter will bring you the returns that you're hoping for in the 10th house in terms of social status and being happy in terms of how you're showing up in life. Mars is in the 11th house. That's going to bring you quite a lot of energy in terms of what your future entails. This can also be where you put a lot of effort into collective things, things that have political or religious or some kind of social importance. The 11th house is also the house of gains. So that might also come through at this time where you're recognizing something that you're receiving from what you're benefiting of in the 10th house. The Jupiterian quality of the 10th might be showing you that, but the Mars in the 11th can actually also run into issues around connections with people, especially as it's trining Saturn at this point. So there can be something that really needs renegotiating in terms of connections, perhaps with business partners, life partners, of course, but relationships of all kinds are the seventh house. It's just how you do relationships. That's what needs to be restructured here. And that Mars in the 11th may actually have you feeling the courage to kind of stop it, like cut things off, where this eclipse is also showing you that there are things that have just run their course, especially for relationships where you don't any longer share the same values. Right. I think that's pretty much it there, Virgo. It's enough on your plate as it is. But yeah, I think this is one of the relatively easy places to have this eclipse in the sense that the mission is much more clear. It has to do a lot with the direct consequences of your relationships on your life and your everyday work. So the choice becomes really clear, especially because you, meaning your representation of Mercury, is in this eclipse thick and fast. So you're changing your mind, you're changing your ability to relate and speak to others through relationships. Right, yeah, good luck with all of that, Virgo. I will see you in the next video. So Libra, this is of course a big part of the last year for you as the South Node has been going through your first house, and this puts you under a lot of pressure for change. You're giving up ways of being that you have been working towards since July 2023, and the North Node is pulling in new relationships and new ways of being in relationships since that time. And currently with this eclipse, there's something that you're needing to regenerate. So you're simultaneously letting go and starting something else. Meaning I, as a Libran, I'm starting over. I'm starting this thing because I realize I need to stop that thing. So it's a bit of a paradox. It's both and. So this eclipse is a really very strong for you, Libra. It will impact you. You will definitely be feeling this for a very long time to come. It's on the angles, like with all of the other cardinal signs. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn are the cardinal signs. And those are the ones that are strongly impacted by this nodal axis for the last year or more, as well as especially this particular eclipse. And in March, the 29th of March, 2025, you're going to get an eclipse in your house of relationship that will wrap up this cycle. But you are really, at this point, letting go of some aspect of yourself. You'll see that when the South Node moves into the 12th house, you have access to a completely different way of living your life, but also a different vision in terms of your connection to life, maybe more spiritual, more allowing of moving on, letting things go. So this is a super opportunity for you to turn the lens inside. Now, Venus, your ruler, is in the second house of your values, your worth, your sense of what you are worth, but also what do you value. And she's ruled by a Mars in the 10th house. So Mars is very strong for you. lots of ambition, lots of drive. But with Mars in Cancer, there can be a lot of frustration because there's something that feels like it's kind of dragging, or it's not entirely easy to express that energy of Mars because it becomes very passionate, very emotional, very impulsive potentially as well. Visceral kind of lashing out is possible, even in terms of your workplace or in terms of your hierarchy, in terms of connection, perhaps with parents as well, or anything that has to do with your outer expression. So, as much as Librans have this lovely reputation for being very diplomatic and charming and very much attuned to what other people need, they can also be exactly the opposite. And especially because the polar opposite of Libra is Aries. And so some of my dearest friends are Librans, and they have what I call foot in mouth disease, which is that they'll say things that can blurt things out in a way that can be quite stark. Not what they intend, but it's just this kind of like blurting things out. And this is one potential with that Mars there in the 10th house that might actually cause you some friction with higher ups, with people in positions of management or hierarchy, government, whatever. So just be aware of that you're recognizing that the potential is there for lashing out. This Mars is in a square to the eclipse. So there's a tension there that is actually personal to you that can have some kind of effect through conflict, through some issues. Now, there's a Venus trine to that Mars, so that appeases it somewhat, and Mars is ruling that Venus. And there's also a trine with Saturn, so that slows down the energy of Mars at this point. So beware of what it is that you see is an important long-term investment in your values, in relationships, and in the protection, let's say, of your everyday work or how you show up in your everyday work so that you don't burn bridges with that Mars in the 10th. So, or at least let's say burn the right bridges because you definitely need to leave something behind and allow other things to come in with this South Node in the first house and the North Node in the seventh. South Node in the first house is a very remarkable, very noticeable change in how you engage in life. You may be confronted with things that you don't like to see when the South Node is in the first house. It can show you things that you don't really like about yourself, and that can be very, very helpful to realize, oh, wait, I've been doing that thing, and I don't want to do that anymore, or I've been like this, and I don't want to be like that anymore. So that's a really lovely opportunity for you to upgrade or change your way of relating to yourself and therefore, of course, to others. Jupiter is in the ninth, so this is super uplifting. Jupiter loves being in the ninth house, as most planets do, because it often brings a feeling of expansion, a feeling of perspective and purpose. And Jupiter up there is certainly helping you with that. So that's actually a real boost in all of this energy. And there's also a trine from your fourth house to your eighth house between Pluto and Uranus. And that is also quite clarifying. It's very supportive. There's something that you're realizing, perhaps coming through family, um, unexpressed things around, like the things the family didn't want to talk about, or family secrets, or things that were unclear that might become clear, especially after all of these years of Pluto dredging up all the stuff from the fourth house, and now with that trine to Uranus, bringing a feeling of I'm ready now. I'm really ready to make this change. Pluto will be in your fifth house where you really start to show up, and then Uranus goes into your ninth house where you really start to realize I don't believe what I used to believe. This is no longer what I find important, and this is who I am. So you're kind of on the precipice here of a really big personal change. And so, Libra, do that really serious work of understanding how you're relating. Is that helpful for you? Is your way of being in relationship constructive, or is that causing you or people around you some kind of frustration or even harm? Not necessarily big time harm, but frustration at the very least. Um, let's just say it this way, when you leave choices up to everybody else, people build up resentment around that because you're not taking responsibility, and that North Node in Aries is asking you to take responsibility. So leaving everybody else to decide, like, what do you want for dinner? Or bigger questions, should we stay in this relationship and this kind of thing? It puts the onus of responsibility on another person, and that's a relationship that's not in balance. So part of being in balance is to take your own share of responsibility. So this is where that new moon energy with Lilith and Mercury are coming in. All right, so Libra, make the most of this. It's going to be a long-lasting life change, all for your benefit through personal growth, and you will definitely remember this year and next. All right, good luck. I'll see you in the next video. Scorpio, this is happening in your 12th house, and that has that quality of things that are behind the eyes, everything that's not really obvious, not necessarily out there in the material world, although it can be if you're dealing with people who are at a distance, for example, family or people that you work with who are far away, people who are special to you, whether they're in body or not in body, are in the 12th house. It's also the house of self-undoing. And so here we go. We've got Venus in your first house of self ruling this letting go of what you're aware now is perhaps your self-undoing in terms of relationships. How do I engage in relationships in a way that may not be helpful? Or it can also be, of course, with regards to your beliefs around your values and what is fair, what is just. That's the Libran quality as well. Um, Libra has that quality of integrity as well, social integrity. Are you in your integrity? That's a good question. A really important thing to explore. What's your connection to your spiritual life? What's your connection to, when nobody's looking, are you doing the right thing? So we have Jupiter in the eighth, kind of testing that question as well. When Jupiter is in the eighth, things are not always that clear either. Around issues of integrity. It's being squared by Saturn in the fifth house, which is partly about, and it's also ruling that Saturn, which is partly about your way of expressing yourself. And maybe there's a feeling of being blocked in expressing yourself fully. But one of the ways that you can confidently learn to express yourself and reach out into life is to live through a genuine sense of integrity. Jupiter rules your second house of what you value. So that again depends on your natal chart, but your values and your integrity give you the confidence to show up in the way that you need to. And with Saturn going through the fifth house, that can be very helpful, very clarifying around that. If this is connecting to children or the obligations around children, that will also clarify where you're taking on the responsibilities around children and how that might require some change with the North Node in the sixth house, how that might need to change your everyday life. Mars is in the ninth house. It's ruling you. That's your planet, Mars, whether you're the rising sign or the sun or the moon sign in Scorpio. It's ruling your sixth house as well. And so there's very much a strong vision that you have for yourself, a new idea, kind of enthusiasm of where you'd like to see yourself going, what you feel is important. You seem to be very motivated to make some changes and expand your horizons. But the more that you fine tune this thing that might be holding you back in terms of what you recognize, maybe your own relationship to what other people can't see, or your relationship to mental or emotional health, or your relationship again to things that are far away from you. Maybe you're finding that difficult to be at a distance from somebody and you need to take action on that. You either need to let that go or you need to change your plan of action, which is partly what Mars is inquiring about there in the ninth house. That's the big question at the time of this eclipse. Now, it's not new because that has been the dynamic, let's say, here with the South Node in the 12th. You may be becoming less materially focused and more spiritually focused as the year goes by. The eclipse is happening in the house of loss with Jupiter in the eighth, and there may be some issue of loss that can be a final quality of loss, losing a loved one, somebody passing on, somebody dying, or it can be loss in the more emotional sense. There's a loss that is more of a relational loss. Your Uranus is changing your relationships anyway in the seventh house, and Venus is in your first. So this can also be playing a role. Whatever the quality of the relationship is, there's some aspect of relating that needs to be let go. We see Pluto in the third, trining that Uranus. And so things to do with your ideas, your opinions, but especially Pluto in the third is asking for truth. What is true for you? How do you speak the truth? How do you communicate all of that? That's part of this equation as well. So let's see what else we've got. I think that's probably it, Scorpio. It's already quite a lot. So yeah, you're pretty comfortable with these behind the scenes things, but the more that you live from this place of what is just and fair, um, the more that you will be able to find your way with that Mars in the ninth, because this is, remember, Mars is in your ninth, then in your 10th between now and June of next year. So this is a very big part of this journey through the North Node that will then take you into the fifth house of how do I reach out into the world? How do I create? How do I express something of myself? All right, so Scorpio, I'll see you in the next video and stay well. Sagittarius, this is happening in your 11th house. It's a house of gains, of money that you earn from what you do. It's a house of friendship and collective associations, people that you hang out with because you share the same ideas. The 11th house is your vision for your future. And it seems like here you're ready to recognize something that you're prepared to let go of. Now, this is since July last year that the South Node has been in this 11th house. So this is just an extension of that year plus transit. So we're like 14, almost 15 months out of that. And this is an extension of that that continues until January. And then you start to realize what it is that you're at this point really ready to let go. Certain relationships or qualities of relating, patterns of identification with a dream, or what seems to be fair and just, or what seems to be harmonious, that needs tweaking, needs to change at this point, and you're recognizing that. This is a very helpful eclipse for you in that sense, because it's pulling you towards that fifth house North Node, which is very much about how you show up and have you been able to really show up for yourself in this year. Mars has been since beginning of September in your 8th house, where it stays for quite some time. It's going to stay there until April, mid-April, with a little excursion into your 9th house. Mars in the 8th house can show a lot of frustration around intimacy. Mars rules your house of love. So let's say best case scenario, it's great sex, great intimacy, lots of energy in intimacy. But if this is not sorted, this issue of how I relate and how do I relate also to my future and the way that I show up in social interactions or in terms of my vision for myself, then this can become quite unbalanced, and it can actually end up with issues of marital disputes or relational violence or issues that are not so friendly. That Mars is a tricky one in the 8th house. It's kind of, especially because it's not a Mars in strong dignity. It's both in the 8th house, but also in Cancer. So it's not where it's exalted in Capricorn. Mars is in its fall in Cancer. So we're looking at a Mars that doesn't behave super well, especially emotionally. Saturn is in the 4th house, trying to figure out how to stabilize your life, whether that be materially, where do you live, how do you live, what's the foundation for your life, but also in terms of your emotions and your psychology. So this water trine is happening in the psychological houses for you, Sagittarius. So the Saturn trining Mars, trining Venus is pulling in issues of the unconscious mind or patterns of ways of behaving any kinds of things that are not really helpful to you, you'll really want to take care of. Venus is in the 12th house, again, not in strong dignity. She's ruling this eclipse. And there may be something here about addictions or behavior patterns or relating to someone in a way that's not supporting you or not really in your best interest, let's say, something that you should be aware of. Yeah, Jupiter is in your 7th house, which can be great for connecting to people who are supportive, counselors, advisors, good clients, for example, lots of relational energy. But Jupiter in the 7th can also be a little bit difficult to manage in the sense of perhaps, again, a tendency that needs to be explored here at the new moon, at the eclipse, potential for overly accommodating other people, and that will require some of your let's say awareness, your wisdom, Sagittarius, to manage that Jupiter. Jupiter going through the 7th house will resolve relational questions so that they become the best possible relationship for you. So sometimes that means letting go of people, including even long-term relationships, but it's for your best interest. So it's not necessarily always positive for relationships, and especially because Jupiter here is in its detriment. And then this is also about letting go in some way. So don't fear letting go. Recognize that patterns need to be shaken up. Uranus is going to be in your 7th house, shaking up patterns for the next 7 years, starting next year, 2025, I think from beginning of July. So you're cleaning up a lot of this stuff, perhaps an aspect of things that you're recognizing now based on even childhood patterns, that you can really shed that and free yourself up, which is a great Sagittarius word. Free yourself up now to have a better quality in the relationships that you do have, and especially going forward. Pluto is in your 2nd house, so there may be some last thing about family stuff, family burdens, financial issues, issues of gain, issues of belongings, property, and so on. And that's tied to your everyday work or your habits or any kind of issues that need to be dealt with. That might be some kind of crisis issue as well. But it looks favorable because it's a trine is something that you're willing and ready to deal with, that you're ready to instigate and move along with. And what else have we got here? I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. And so keep in mind, your ruler is Jupiter. It's there in the 7th house for quite some time. And that really is where you start to review your standards, let's say, with the people that you spend time with or the quality of people that you allow into your space, because it definitely affects you. It'll affect you psychologically and also in terms of the quality of your life, where you live, literally, because Jupiter also rules your 4th house. So it rules yourself and it rules your 4th house. And so that quality of who's in my life, who's my friend, who do I connect with, what are the beliefs and the people I hang out with related to those beliefs? How do I see my future? And then that Jupiter is very much saying, you want quality people in your life, quality relationships only, please. All right, Sagittarius, good luck with this. I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, this is happening in your 10th house of career. Now, for a very long time, you've not really liked your job. Capricorn, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. And so you're fretting and you're worrying about what to do. How do I shape up in terms of what I do out in the world? Well, this is going to be an opportunity for you to really cut the ties, recognize what has not been functioning, recognize where you've been trying to fit this in, trying to make it look good, but it's not working. And you need to come towards that North Node in the 4th house that says, I am taking care of myself. There's a certain enlightened self-interest about this time, where you need to let go of things around prestige or maybe visions that you had around your ambition. Let it go. Visualize things coming forward in a new way. Mars is in the 7th house. This can involve some kind of tension or separation around issues of partnership. That can be marital partners, but also business partners. So there's an enormous dynamism around that quality of relationship. Mars is in a trine with Venus in your 11th house of other people, but also your vision for the future. And it's ruling that from the 7th. So there's a quality of what is going on in your 10th and how important that is for you, what you need about that. That is being pulled into your sense of the future, the house that's showing you where you want to go. This can also be money coming from what you did or what you want to be doing or what you have been doing over time. That is beneficial, let's say, with Venus in the 11th house is quite helpful. Venus rules your 5th house of children, love affairs, romance, all the fun things, hobbies, and business endeavors that are coming through your projects, the things that you do. And so there may be something that's based on what you're doing that Venus is showing you can bring you some kind of benefit, bring you some kind of profit, but at the same time, it's a feeling of that doesn't apply any longer. There's a new thing that has to come. And so it's a both letting go and a vision for something new to come in, or at the very least, allowing a space for the new thing to come in. Now, Pluto has come back into your 1st house. Pluto coming into your 1st house is very much about the last 16 years of personal growth and transformation that you've been undergoing. So now we've just got it September, October, and the first 3 weeks of November, where Pluto is just checking in. How are you doing? What still remains to be changed? What's still there in this dynamic of power struggles, perhaps with relationships? Where are you struggling with yourself? Where are you struggling to show up? That will be impacting your 2nd house when Pluto moves into the 2nd house of family and money, the money that you earn and the value that you put on things. It's going to be changing dramatically over the next 20 years. No pressure. And so that Pluto is in a trine to Uranus, which is in your 5th house of self-expression. So it's again, it's kind of saying, are you really fully yourself yet? Have you really fully showed up? Are you still doing stuff because you feel you're under pressure for it? And that's that Libra. Are you doing stuff because it looks good, because you think this needs to look good? Or are you doing things because it's right for you? Jupiter in your 6th house has you working hard. Certainly with Saturn in the 3rd house, that pushes you forward as well. That's a house of willpower, working very hard, having lots of goals and aims that take you forward in life. But there's a push and a pull there. So there may be some struggle around that. The struggle may be through a clarity of aims because that Neptune is there. It's kind of pesky. Neptune in the 3rd may not be entirely clear about the goals and the aims that you have, or about the way that you might come across to people, how you communicate with them. So this Jupiter is ruling your 3rd house from the 6th house. So whatever is going on in terms of your, let's say, your work or your aims, your everyday stuff that you're doing in your community with siblings, with the extended family, with your neighborhood, with work, communications, or like things that are practical, practical knowledge, you're putting a lot of effort in through the day-by-day effort that may help you overcome whatever obstacles are there, or it may have you just working like a dog. So be careful, because Jupiter in the 6th can be tricky that way, where you get so involved in what you're doing that you forget that you should also be just kind of kicking back. Jupiter rules the 12th house, which is also spirit, confinement, people at a distance, people far away, people who have passed. And so there may be something that you're feeling is needs to come through your everyday life based on that 12th house energy. You're pulling that 12th house energy into your everyday life. That might involve also dealing with health crises or things that are coming through a health issue. Again, that would depend on your chart. Doesn't mean that just having a planet in the 6th house doesn't mean you have health issues. That would depend on you in your natal chart and how that's affecting you personally. I think that's it, Capricorn. Yeah, Mars is good for you. Mars is your strong planet. It's your exaltation ruler. And so it's in an angular house that's very strong, ruling your 4th house. It's just that sometimes you might find that Mars a little passive aggressive, and you might get, up people's noses with that. So just beware. Be nice. Capricorn. Be nice. And then your ruler, Saturn in the third, can have you really determined to succeed. And I think the solution for success is to come closer to yourself, sincere with what you need and what you want, and recognizing that there life ebbs and flows, that there are times when it's all about ambition, it's all about showing up, and there are other times when it's all about letting go, so that you can be more in the flow of who you are, and not insisting on holding on to something that really doesn't function so well for you any longer. So don't look back, Capricorn. There's something new on your professional horizon, for sure. And it needs to align with how you're feeling about yourself, how you understand yourself in relationship. All right, make the most of that, Capricorn. I'll see you in the next video. And Aquarius, this is happening in your ninth house. So there's some vision that you've been holding for the last year plus, since July 2023, that you're recognizing is not relevant any longer. Maybe there's been too much of a focus on what feels like an ideology or a vibe or a belief or something that's out there that needs to be grounded in something. And certainly with Mars in your sixth house of everyday work and how you show up with the ruling that north node, that's part of this story in a really big way. So this is about letting go of something, but replacing it almost simultaneously, saying, this is no longer that. This is what I understand now, and recognizing that this new thing. Saturn is in your house of money, but also representing values. What do I value? What is my value? Saturn is ruled by Jupiter in your fifth house, where there's a sense of, I want to show up more in my life. And the Jupiter itself is ruled by that Mercury in the ninth, which has big ideas, big plans, big visions. So this is something that's quite dynamic, that plays a lot on the sense of your inherent worth and what your picture is for your vision of life. The North Node in the third house has you really practical. You have to put a lot of practical effort into achieving what you want at the moment, Aquarius. And Saturn in the second house can really pay off for you. It is your ruler, and although it comes through often delays, doesn't mean that you're denied having abundance. It does represent an effort that's required to get there. But when you put that hard effort in, and potentially through some kind of risk taking, it could be an investment, or it could be, who knows, depending on your chart, it could also be buying a lottery ticket, for example. That is one potential here. Again, depends on your natal chart and what the promise is around money and winnings and good luck and stuff like that. So you're really on the precipice of a big shift based on your sense of your values and what you hold dear, what you find is an important belief, a root, foundational belief, let's say. Pluto is trining Uranus from the 12th house to the 4th house. So there's something very profound that's going on, and it has been for ages, like years, where there's a sense of yourself that's shifting. It's groundbreaking. Pluto is going to completely rework who you are and how you show up over the next 20 years, but you've already had a flavor of this. Pluto has just dipped back into your 12th house, and that can pull you back into an awareness of unconscious motivations or habits and things that are not helpful. Pluto is in the house of self-undoing. It's unconscious things that, or things that are not necessarily unconscious, but things that we don't want other people to see. We don't want them for all kinds of reasons, not necessarily nefarious ones, but we just don't want people to see. So that deep awareness of what's going on behind the scenes is part of your transformation here with that trine between Pluto in the 12th and Uranus in the 4th. The Uranus in the 4th will have destabilized your sense of what you can rely on in terms of the foundation physically for life, in terms of your financial security, perhaps as well, but also metaphysically, metaphorically. What do you rely on? How can you feel yourself to be stable? And that Saturn in the second house is helping you, showing you the way. It's saying you need to find what you value. What's your value personally, and what do you value? And once you've stabilized that, you're going to stabilize the rest. the South Node lunar eclipse is part of that process where you're saying, okay, I used to have this vision, I used to have this idea of what I was here for, or I used to have this belief, and I don't any longer. It's not any longer about that. And whatever this change is, it's going to show up in a way that allows you to move forward with your ambitions and your plans for the future. Mars is ruling your 10th house from the 6th house of everyday work. You're chipping away just bit by bit. Mars is trining Saturn, good hard work ethic, which is in a grand trine with that Venus. So as you chip away, Venus is the exaltation ruler of your 2nd house of money. So all of this foundation of change and just slogging it out, just carrying it on one step at a time will bring you some kind of fortune, some kind of benefit at the end of the day. So I'd have to see your natal chart to describe that better. But carry on basically is the word here. Carry on by letting go. So try and figure that one out, Aquarius. I'll see you in the next video. And Pisces, this is happening in your 8th house of intimacy and what you understand to be the unconscious mind, or what you might not be aware of, but is surfacing. The 12th house is what we're really not so sure about. We often need somebody else to show it up, unless it's a material thing that's behind physical closed doors or far, far away from us. But the 8th house is things that we kind of know are lurking, and then they come to the surface. And here we have some kind of an outlet for that, where the new moon is saying, notice this, pay attention to this way of being in relationship, this way of showing up in terms of what you are valuing and how you're valuing yourself. What is necessary for you now is to put a lot more attention on whether it be money or resources or your personal self-worth. You want to let go of what you previously relied on others for, whether that's their opinions of you or money, their values, and you're recognizing, I don't share them. I need to move that in a new direction. Mars is in your 5th house of love, of children as well, and in anything to do with childbearing or creative projects. And Mars is, of course, the ruler of that North Node in the 2nd house. So there's a lot to do with that combination of how you earn money, or what guides you forward in terms of your values, and how you want to show up and be seen, what the creative process might be, which seems very, very much connected to this belief or this value that you have in yourself, in the money that you're ready to earn or invest or hold on to, because Mars in the 5th also is about investment, risk-taking. And also with the 9th house, Mars ruled Venus there, real vision for your sense of purpose. What is it that you're ready to do? Venus is ruling your 8th house of relationships and the intimacy. But in the 9th house, there's a stronger sense of why. There's a stronger sense of the ideological foundation of that, that can be very powerful, because she's in a trine with Mars right now that's ruling her. That's also trining your 1st house where Saturn is. And so there's something stabilizing here in terms of your dharma, your purpose, the why, the big why. And that's not about a job. It's not about a thing that you do. It's about the way that you live your life. What is my purpose in life? There's a whole big questioning going on there. Something needs to stabilize in your 1st house of self, around how you discipline yourself, or allow yourself to have better boundaries, more clarity around boundaries, maybe a clearer vision of who you are. And Jupiter in the 4th house is also suggesting that there's an expanded relationship to your psychological foundation, or even your physical foundation, your home, something bigger appearing on the scene. Now, Jupiter in Gemini always will have a quality of a duality, meaning 2 homes. I want to be in 2 different places, for example. I think I've been talking too much. Jupiter, sorry, Pisces. Jupiter rules your midheaven as well as your 1st house. And so this can also be about working from home. working from home, or also that entrepreneurial or enterprising or risk-taking quality from the fifth back to the second about how to make money. That's not part uniquely about the eclipse, but it's definitely a part of the story because it concerns you so personally, Pisces, and of course your work and how you show up. So this eclipse is letting go of a way that you expected to get money from other people or support from other people or intimacy, how you approach intimacy. And that requires your attention and your modification, something different. Maybe there has been some kind of worry or fear or protection or possessiveness around issues of relationships or money. And this is what is changing, what's possible to change. Now, Venus loves being in the ninth. It's all about expansion and learning. Um, so it's a helpful placement for the ruler of this eclipse, even if she's not in strong dignity, because she's ruled by Mars. So watch the beginning to find out again about the dignities and why it's not really adding up completely. Pluto is in your 11th house for the very last time. You have figured out who you want in your life, also the vision that you had, or this participation in different groups that you were focused on for a very long time, and it's done. It's just done. So let it go. Uranus in your third house is carrying that energy through the local space, relationships with siblings, how you communicate, extended family, and your willpower, your short-term goals as well. So all of this is shifting simultaneously. This will be the last eclipse that you have these energies pulling in from the 11th to the 3rd. So there's a big shift on the horizon, and it'll start with you trying to understand what might be blocking me to get to this place of myself, my self-worth, my capacity to earn money, my comfort in intimacy with other people, so that eventually when the North Node moves into the first house mid-January, I get to this place where I'm myself. I'm focusing on me and expanding myself while the South Node goes through the seventh, saying, all that way of being in relationship, it's done now. So there you are, Pisces. It's it's an interesting place. The eighth house always brings up some really interesting stuff. Also, by the way, of course, around astrology, anything to do with astrology, learning or starting a new course of learning, or recognizing old habits around patterns of mystery schools or occult, or even an over-reliance on these things. That's one way that could show up as well. Recognizing, oh, wait, I've been giving too much power to those things, and I need to take that out into a better place. All right, Pisces, thanks for watching. Have a really great eclipse, and I'll see you in the next video.